We're back now with Governor Gary Herbert. Governor, let's get into air quality. $100 million investment recommendation from you into air quality. I can't recall an investment like that in air quality. How would you like to see that spent? Because we know how big of a threat that is to our way of life, you know, personally and economically.
Yeah. Well, you're right, and it's kind of a moonshot. It's an opportunity for us to really infuse money into the system to see what we can do to reduce pollution. We've done a pretty good job, actually, but we probably haven't messaged as well as we could. But I've said we can do it by the state leading by example, so we can do better with our own vehicles. We can change those out, dirty diesels, get more hybrids, more electrical cars, more transit opportunities, telecommuting for some of our workers. But we can also make a big dent by putting in electrical charging stations, the infrastructure that makes it more easy to charge your electric vehicles. So we can put 300 of those stations out at the state locations around Utah and make it more convenient, plus an 800 that we're going to try to incent with the private sector. So really tailpipe emissions are the biggest problem we have with our inversion days out there. So this is a big shot at trying to incent people to have cleaner burning automobiles.
School safety. Last year at the end of the session, after the Parkland shooting, a lot of urgency centered toward what are we going to do in Utah schools to make sure this never happens here. The commission came up with ideas, and then it kind of became quiet throughout the summer. Are you still dedicated to that and making sure that we are implementing some real solutions there here in the state of Utah? Absolutely,
and the fact that it's quieter just has probably a reflection of the news cycle and not having any shootings, which we hope we never have. But all the districts have reported back to me and to the state school board as far as what are you putting in place for protection. Are we doing things to make sure that there's single entrance to the schools? What about the architecture? Can we change? But one of the things we're doing in the budget and with the legislature's approval is putting a lot more money into counseling. Again, not just career counseling, but for mental health counseling. We're putting $100 million into our school districts for schools to change architecture, to put in school safety opportunities, which can happen in a myriad of different ways, from people patrolling the halls to having shut down mechanisms to close doors and isolate any kind of an intruder. So a lot of work is going on still, maybe quietly, but it's still going on.
Let's talk 2020. You've personally told me that you don't plan to seek re-election in 2020. And then at times at press conferences, you know, whether in jest or not, I'm not sure, you've said, well, never say never. And then another report surfacing this week in the Deseret News, putting that into question. Are you planning to run again in 2020 or not?
I'm not. And as I've mentioned to any reporter who's asked, and I'll mention it to you again, I see no scenario where I will be running for governor in 2020. But when people ask me, does that mean there's no way, no possible way that you'd ever run for governor? The answer is never say never. I mean, there's a lot of scenarios out there that maybe could happen. I'd say, well, maybe I need to, or I'd be compelled to. But there's no plan. I don't have an exploratory committee. I'm not doing anything in that regard. So there's no plans to run.
What might compel you to?
Well, I don't want to even discuss what that would be, because there's some of it would be a disaster kind of thing. But I don't have any plans. I think we've done our job and done a good job of it, and so it's time for probably a new person to come into this place. But we'll see what happens. But again, anybody who follows me around knows that I have no plans to run in 2020. There's no scenario I can see right now that would compel me to run.
Do you look at the potential field? Very few people have officially jumped in, but do you look at the potential field and say, there's one person I would like to have succeed me?
There's a number of good people out there that have certainly the capabilities and the qualifications to make the case that they should be elected as governor. And so I'm not really endorsing anybody right now, but I am a little partial to my own lieutenant governor, who's doing a great job, has spent his time in the private sector, understands the free market, which is important, I think, to know and make sure we preserve that. He's been a local government official and different capacities and been in the legislature. And there's no better training ground than lieutenant governor. So he's got to be at the top of everybody's list if you're looking for people who kind of fit the profile of what would be a good governor. That being said, there's other good people out there too.
What about a guy like Greg Miller or Thomas Wright?
They're good people. Again, I know them both.
Lots of others potentially as well.
They're good people, and so the public's going to have, I think, an opportunity to hear their vision for the future of Utah and determine who's going to be the next leader, who should be the best person to take on after I leave.
Governor, we will catch up with you again at the end of the session. Thanks so much for your time. I appreciate you being here on Inside Utah Politics.
It's always great to be with you, Glenn. Thank you.
Coming up, we're going to break down the first week of the legislative session with two former lawmakers, our panel discussion, right after the break. Stay with us.